The voice of sharing during ASEAN.
Hi, good morning. This is Gowri on Durian ASEAN. How are you guys doing today? It's a beautiful Wednesday morning, and I have some fresh news for you here as always. But before that, let me start with a quote by one of my favorite authors, Paulo Coelho. And he said, "When you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it." And that is a very beautiful quote that inspires you and also kind of incorporates the law of attraction. When you want something and you put out that thought and that's all you think about, and the universe is going to somehow align itself and get you what you want. Okay, moving on to our news for today. The first news will be about Indonesia, reported from Reuters, where Jokowi scores points but no knockout in Indonesia's first presidential debate. So the two candidates are in close opinion polls ahead of the July 9 election. Although Jokowi holds the edge, up to 40% of the voters are still undecided, one survey has said. The winner will lead the world's fourth most populous nation, which has more Muslims than any other country, for the next 5 years. Both have promised market-friendly policies to revive growth in Southeast Asia's largest economy, which fell to the lowest in 4 years in the first quarter. "I don't think there were any knockout blows," said Paul Rowland, a Jakarta-based political analyst. "I think Jokowi did what he needed to do, and that was to perform confidently in a very public venue." Prabowo, who was formerly married to the daughter of authoritarian leader Suharto, relies on his strongman and nationalistic image to appeal to the voters wary of what is perceived to be indecisive leadership under current President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, who is due to leave the office in October. Both candidates said they would strengthen the country's popular anti-graft agency, the Corruption Eradication Commission, which has exposed high-level corruption and arrested cabinet ministers, company executives, political leaders despite limited resources. So as much as Jokowi has actually scored some points, he is a popular candidate, but these analysts are saying that he still doesn't make sure that he's gonna win. He's just ahead of his opponent, which is a good thing. But there is no final say, and up to 40% of the voters are still undecided about who they're going to vote really. So moving on to our next news.
And I will read about it.
Yeah.
The next one is about South Korea. So South Korea give a warship to the Philippines. The Philippines Navy will soon get a much welcome gift from South Korea that could help modernize its antiquated fleet at a time when it's trying to look strong in the face of increasingly aggressive actions from Beijing or China. So the show of support of hopelessness outgunned Filipino outgunned Filipinos partly sends a message to China that ties between Seoul and Manila are strong and strengthening, not least when it comes to defense. So the donation set to arrive by the end of the year is also prudent move that could benefit South Korea.
So in addition to that, Seoul is working to convince Philippines to buy its KA-1 Wungbi following a call last month by the Philippine Air Force that it was in the market for 6 new close air support aircraft. It's a military lingo for planes that protect soldiers on the ground. So I think the main reason for this is not only to show that South Korea and Philippines actually have a good diplomatic relationship, but also because Manila feels like it's finally time to make China and also other countries in the region take Philippines a little more seriously.
And also we have to understand the diplomatic relationship in East Asia. So the relationship between Japan, South Korea and China is very complex and very it's like a love-hate relationship, but it's a bit more. It's taken a bit too towards to the extreme in the sense that they are not really. I mean, due to their historical happenings between all the three countries, they are not really in good terms, but they are not really in bad terms in a way as such. So for South Korea to support Philippines is actually to show that they are also in solidarity in terms of how the Chinese power has become much bigger and how much this country needs to sort of like protect its own sovereignty and help each other during the time of crisis.
Okay. Also, because I think China is kind of intimidating all the countries around it now. So these people are probably trying to join forces with each other to show China that although we are a lot of small countries, it could actually, if we all join together, we can actually have enough power to intimidate you and be as strong as you even.
Yeah, and also, I think in a sense that about China, right? China itself is very huge, and it used to be just a normal country with a huge population, and it's also used to be one of the poorest country. But now he has grown bigger, and he has much more military might than it used to be. And in the past, it used to just it's the only country that it's used to be very much offensive would be Taiwan because of Taiwan's link to China, but nowadays it has become much more than just land. It has become about the sea as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, so the South China Sea is definitely a very critical sort of like sea mass for China to sort of extract all the economic benefit, especially the minerals and the oils that is underneath the sea.
So would China actually be intimidated by move, so to speak? Also, because I mean, yes, I know South Korea gives a warship to Philippines, but is that a reason for China to start worrying? To say
what?
Will China actually be intimidated by this move, like and start being more wary?
It will not be intimidated. It's too big to be intimidated by small countries.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just one warship, but in a sense that it's also a sense of urgency that war could spark between ASEAN countries and China.
Mm-hmm.
Despite China giving us two pandas, we actually a much more riskier region than they initially thought.
Yeah, we're caught right in the middle of it all, actually, with China, Philippines, Vietnam, all having conflicts.
We are, definitely. So, I mean, for Malaysia, it's very risky in a sense because we need to decide, like who to support. But of course, for Malaysia's foreign policy position, it's always been obvious that we are always in a neutral ground. We do not overtly support any party unless it's sort of affecting us directly. So in that sense, I think Malaysia is in a neutral position on this.
Okay, let's move on to Indonesia again. Beyond Bali, the 3 best other places to visit in Indonesia. So I think this is actually a very interesting news because whenever people talk about going to Indonesia, the only place that they ever think of is Bali.
Yeah.
And personally, after spending 6 months there, I feel like there are a ton of other amazing places that people can go to, but they're just not aware about it. It's always Bali that comes to mind because the government have worked so hard to promote it as the place to go when you're in Indonesia.
You have a book that actually promote Bali, the Love, Eat, Pray.
Eat, Pray, Love.
Eat, Pray, Love. Oh my God, I mix it up. So
that's okay.
I mean, I love the movie.
Yeah.
And I think the movie is has a bit of misconception because she went to Italy, India, and Bali.
Yeah.
It should be Indonesia, not Bali, because Bali is just an island. Indonesia is the whole country.
So Australians are worried that their beloved Bali is being overrun with tourists and being encouraged to seek alternative Indonesian holiday destinations. A travel fair in Bali this week will encourage visitors to see the island as a gateway to adventures beyond popular beaches of Kuta and Seminyak. So the 3 places that they actually suggested was, I think, the Komodo Islands, which is the home to the Komodo dragon, a rich marine environment for diving, sailing, and kayaking. And I think that's all great, but we also know that the Komodo dragon can actually eat humans,
And they
and
are not
that's
friendly. They are
oh,
not a
yeah.
friendly neighbor.
that is not encouraging at all. But I guess if you're up for an adventure, if you don't mind getting eaten alive, then you can go to the Komodo Island.
Yeah, it's interesting that they say it's also a place for environment for diving, sailing, and kayaking. Because to me, I would not. I mean, I would be close to the island just to observe the animal,
Right,
but not
right.
like spending time at the island and
I
doing
hope the
island
Indonesian
activities.
government doesn't sue me for saying this, because I'm pretty much, I don't know, I cannot just, they are scary
Yeah.
animals.
And the next one is Yogyakarta or
Uh-huh.
Yogyakarta. It's an arts, culinary, and culture hub in Central Java. A 1-hour flight from Bali. It's also home to Borobudur, a Buddhist temple dating from the 8th century and a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Yeah, I think Yogyakarta is one of the underrated places. Actually, it's got a very good balance of city and also country. I think it's not too city like Jakarta. It's you can find a lot of interesting places there, like all the temples. You can find Borobudur there, and they also have all these very nice traditional markets and the palace. And it's actually
Yeah, a lot of people do not know, but the governor of Yogyakarta is actually the king.
yeah, that's
The-
right.
the
Because
king
over there,
himself.
that's how it works.
So the next one is Banyuwangi. It's an easternmost end of Java. It can be accessed by ferry from Bali. Sites include stunning volcanic scenery, world famous surfing at G-Land, and the remote Alas Purwa National Park. So I think this is a more like I would say a more
Probably for, like,
forest
nature
dense
lovers,
sort
yeah.
of environment.
So Nyoman Sukma Arida, who is from the Udayana University, has been warning for 10 years that Bali tourism is approaching saturation, pointing to signs of environmental stress all over the island. And a moratorium on new hotel developments was ineffective, he says, and the government should urgently discuss how to save Bali from its own success.
Yeah.
So I think
but
it's...
you know why people are attracted to Bali. I mean, I've been there once.
Mhm.
I realized it's not just about the beaches and the whole island feel. It's also about the culture. You have a very ancient Hindu culture being practiced by
Yeah, that's right.
locals who are non-Indians, who are actually Indonesians themselves. And the way the Buddhist the Hinduism that they practice is totally unique to the extent that I don't think you can find the same sort of Hinduistic practice in other parts of the world.
I guess it's also fused with the Hindu Buddha influence, and they've got a lot of beautiful deities and statues all around Bali, but at the same time, it's become so commercialized that everything is way expensive there. If you go to other places in Java and you go to Bali, it's probably pretty much the same as Jakarta almost. Everything's overpriced. The hotels, the taxis.
But I think I mean this news is for Australians, right? I think for Australians it's also about the surfing culture. Like you cannot have the same kind of surfing experience in probably other islands or other places, like Yogyakarta, for example, or Komodo Island. They are they have very specific activity that you can do, but not necessarily surfing.
But I
So-
guess then again, it doesn't just apply to Australians. Even in Malaysia, like when you mention Indonesia, people just want to go to Bali. And I guess Bandung comes up sometimes because it's a good place for shopping. But I think probably the Indonesian government has to start promoting other places as well. So Bali doesn't, like it said, is becoming too saturated with tourists. And
Or they should come to Malaysia instead. But to be very frank, I think being a bit nationalistic in this sense, Malaysian beaches are much more nicer. I mean, we have white sand and all that. But, I mean, for example, Kuta Beach is actually not as hype as what people think. I mean, the beaches there, I mean, the quality of the beaches at Kuta Beach, besides, the strong wave, other than that, it's just, as not as appetizing as probably beaches in
Langkawi.
Pulau Perhentian in Langkawi, or even in islands at Sabah.
Okay, let's move on to our next news reported by Bernama, which says Baram MP says he's still with SPDP. So the MP Aningau asserts that he remains loyal to the new Sarawak Chief Minister.
And this is his first term as a member of parliament for Barisan Nasional. So just last month, he, alongside with 10 other lawmakers, have declared to defect to Sarawak Progressive Democratic Party.
So I think Ngao blames his naivety in politics for his series of reversals of decisions, and some observers remain skeptical about his apparent decision to defect.
Mm-hmm. But we are just wondering, could be more reasons to it for him to defect to other party.
So moving on to Myanmar now, which is your favorite country.
So activists are still in prison despite completing jail term. So officials are holding an activist in custody despite him serving his sentence.
And Ko Ai Tien was sentenced to 6 months of hard labor on December 2013. Mr. Tyne is a land right activist. It is learned that an application from him was rejected earlier, and officials did not mention about his whereabouts when inquired. And also, this reflects the newfound freedom where media can bring out sensitive issues. But however, their reluctant government stance also shows its stronghold in the country.
I wonder what is 6 months of hard labor would be, because I never experienced, the idea of hard labor before. It could be just construction work and all that, isn't it?
Probably, yeah.
6 months of unpaid work for the government.
But, holding up an activist, and activists are usually the people fighting for a certain cause, and I guess to just put him in jail and not investigate what really happened, that kind of doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's kind of interesting in a way that they are still practicing their old ways of doing things, which means that they are still sort of trying to exert their militaristic power for the junta rather than trying to openly, move on towards a democracy. I mean, economically, I can attest to it that they have totally liberalized their economy in the sense that you see a lot of development, a lot of foreign investment as well. A lot of other countries and even the US are, moving in. But when it comes to political liberation, I don't think it's moving as quicker as what we are expecting it to be. So anyway, moving on from Myanmar, we report news from Vientiane Times. Government may lift ban on mining land concessions ahead of schedule. So the government may revoke a suspension and resume the approval of new investment proposal in mining or land concession for rubber and eucalyptus. Eucalyptus plantation as part of efforts to boost growth over the next 2 years, although in a more limited capacity than before the ban.
Yeah, the government has realized that it may not be able to maintain a blanket ban on all approvals and will instead proceed more cautiously by carrying out proper strategic forecast, an official from the Ministry of Planning and Investment has said. The government also suspended approvals for any new investments in mining or land concessions for rubber and eucalyptus plantations in 2012 after learning that many investors had breached agreements and relevant laws.
As some projects have impacted the country's environment and livelihood of local people, the government said it would consider any proposals on these kinds of projects until December 31st next year. And the suspension has given the government time to review its policy and assess the effectiveness of existing projects to make sure Laos can maximize its benefit from the sectors.
I noticed you say Lao. Why is that?
Laos?
Yeah.
I don't know. They don't really pronounce the S, interestingly.
That's a bit off topic, but I was just curious.
So, I mean, I often hear Lao people say, oh, Lao, not Laos. But I mean, in Malaysia, we are used to saying as Laos.
So the government here is actually revoking a suspension for new investments. And I think they're trying to put a control on that. But at the same time, they're finding it difficult to actually put a ban on all these approvals, and I think instead they're trying to now go about it more cautiously by coming up with more strategies for all these new proposals in mining and land concessions as well as plantations.
I mean, among all the Southeast Asian countries, we can say that Laos is one of the most, I would say, backward countries when it comes to development. So the country is generally, like, I guess, still in a state of like majority rural areas. And they don't have like a strong sort of city, a town, in their capital city or in other towns as well, unlike other countries in Southeast Asia. So in that sense, right, they are still depending a lot on agricultural and also commodity crops as part of their GDP, their import and export. So in that sense, I think they are still not. I mean, they're still focusing a lot on those kind of commodity crops and all that. But I don't know. But in the future, maybe they might be more industrialized in that sense. But it's just time to see. But for now, I think the people and the government itself are sort of like
assessing
whether to move on or to just to focus more on what they are good at.
Okay, I think our next news is from Brunei, reported by Brew Direct, identifying nations' belief, culture, and identity through architectural feat. That's quite interesting. Brunei's architecture is a topic that has been frequently debated by architects as well as academics. The Minister of Development remarked that in trying to define what is Brunei architecture, the symbiotic relations between architecture, religion, culture, and identity which reflect the life in Brunei must be acknowledged. So speaking at the official launching of the 2-day seminar, workshop and exhibition on architecture, religion, culture, and identity, the Minister of Development questioned whether the buildings in the Sultanate did reflect the belief, culture, and identity of Brunei.
And what's the name of the Minister of Development?
Well, it's a really long name. I was trying to skip it. Well, thanks for bringing it up. I think it's Yang Amat Berhormat Pahin Orang Kaya Indra Pahlawan Datuk Seri Setia Awang Haji Surya Othman. There you have it. And also he said that the seminar sought to search answers to those questions. According to Yang Berhormat, the Sultanate is also such a newbie in nation, as majority of the buildings was relatively new with complete lack of ancient structures that can help trace back the country's architectural history.
So I like when he actually sort of like asks, can architecture influence or shape the way we live? Is it the right architectural language and identity? Because I think architecture reflects the culture of the people. You don't build something just for the sense of practicality. You build something because it has aesthetic meaning to it.
That's right, and it also goes back to the history. I'm not too sure about KL, but like if you go to Penang, there's this place that you can go where you see all these British style buildings and that
colonial buildings,
and that kind of gives it a very colonial feeling. The British were here. They built all these buildings. The style is different.
They
the
still
colors are
preserve,
different.
the old cultural buildings.
So I think he's right in that way when he said that that architecture can actually reflect culture and identity of the people there.
Talking about old colonial buildings, I think they should also preserve old, cultural buildings of who. In the past, a lot of people migrated in this country, in Malaysia, or even in countries like in Brunei. So in that sense, there's a huge mixed fusion of architecture that the government should preserve, as part of the way to sort of say, this is our culture. Our culture is not monotonous. Our culture is very diverse and very deep in that sense.
Right. And also when you actually build something like what you said, people don't just build it, a lot of thought goes into it, the entire process. And when you build something, it kind of stays there for a long time. So they should consider whether the architectural language is actually in line with the culture of the people, the identity of the people, and it reflects the lifestyle even. And when someone is visiting the country, they look at the building and they know, they can kind of tell even what the culture must be in
definitely,
this place.
for sure. You don't go to countries like Italy and expect buildings
exactly.
minimalist
buildings.
Minimalist building like what you see in Scandinavian countries. You would expect really culturally rich Gothic church of the past centuries, and also very Italian looking buildings. So it sort of enriches you as a person as well. So it's not just the architecture; it's also about the environment and the people.
Okay, I think that's all the time that we have for today. We'll have to wrap up the news this morning, and we'll be back in a bit for our Blast from the Grassroots session.
Stay tuned.